Hi, I'm Larry Rifkin. This podcast is going to be a bit different than most of the episodes we have posted to date, and for good reason. It was recorded in Boston recently as part of an event that I did help to initiate. And I say that to let you, our listener, know that this event had special significance to me. First, it allowed me to work with my daughter, Leora, who herself is a change agent in Boston as part of Epicenter Community, now part of the Transformative Culture Project, and her own organization, Bread, helping entrepreneurs of color push their ideas along. Second, I wanted this event to stand as a testimonial to a beloved colleague of mine, Andrew Jones. And following the talk, I will share my thoughts about Andrew. Now, you'll hear his name mentioned by our presenter today, Curtis Davis. We'll open with my introduction of Curtis Davis from that evening. Suffice it to say, he's a man of incredible ability, profound achievement, and his message about how hard social change is so important in a time when many want to know what they can do to have their voice heard. Now, as a preface, what connects Curtis Davis and my friend Andrew Jones is what they attempted to do together, lending their very different skill sets to the process. One plotting, deliberate, intentional, and empirical in his approach, that being Mr. Davis. And Andrew was more the lyricist, the propagandist, the image maker, heart and head coming together to create major change. Now, please don't get me wrong. Both men are fiercely brilliant, but brought together unique intelligences. Toward what, you might ask? Well, back in the 1980s in Boston, a city rife with a long history of racial problems, they had the audacious notion to try to politically subdivide the Greater Roxbury area of Boston from the rest of the city. Some called it secession. Others, reincorporation. Trying to control land and wrest control of it, believe me, is no small task. They called the movement Mandela, Massachusetts, and twice they got the measure on the ballot. While it failed both times, support grew from one referendum to the next, and there were lessons learned and the scars to prove it. Let's hear how one of the co-founders of Mandela, Massachusetts, describes what's involved in making meaningful social change. And then please, stay for my tribute to my friend, Andrew Jones, at the conclusion. Though we're here tonight really to explore the history and the roots of GRIP, Greater Roxbury Incorporation Project, and he being the co-founder. The keynote address that he will deliver tonight, Leadership, Movements, and Reflections on Social Change Agency. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Curtis Davis.
Well, this is great to see all of you here. And I'm glad it's such an intergenerational room. My daughter is here, number 9, Amalia, and her brother, Jordan, and their mother, Michelle. And I start there because Andrew and I were neighbors in the Piano Factory building. And most of you are familiar with that place. And I knew him through my first wife. And they were both classmates at the New England Conservatory of Music. So when I first met Andrew, it was him playing violin. And for those of you who know him, he was probably the most intense person that I ever knew. And for those who really know him, if he gets his eyes on you, and he had this way of giving you the eye. It was a very intense look that would go right through you. And when I say go through you, that is not as you were gossamer or a cloud, but like you were a brick wall. It was like laser burning through you. I say that because he and Michelle were really good friends. They were very close. And I met her through him. And we were really intensely working together. As you can imagine, a project like this was very intense. His talents were one of the reasons we were attracted to each other as friends was primarily one of affinity for difference. We were very different people. We weren't the same personality at all. But at the same time, we had a similar level of curiosity about the world, and we would sit up all night many times. And this was back in the day when the marijuana was real. So I won't lie. There was a lot of purple haze in the room when we were having some conversations. But the conversations were very, very serious about the nature of the city. And he was interested in the nature of the city, and I was kind of the person that he would lean on and push on and query and really inquire into about the city. And I had been working at the time for the Executive Office of Communities and Development, and before that I had worked in Roxbury for the Greater Roxbury Development Corporation. And that job got me connected to community activism in Boston through the Southwest Corridor Project, Stopping the Highway. So as I was coming out of the college, that project was being successful. And I got very much involved in the planning and design as a community activist, working with the Greater Roxbury Development Corporation on a lot of the station area task forces. That kind of knowledge and education beyond architecture school really gave me an understanding and appreciation about city building. And that's kind of where I've taken my career. So even though there are lots of different things on the resume, it was really intentional from the point of view of understanding how we build cities and how we build community. And at this point in my career, I'm 65. Well, I'll be 65 in July. I count this as 65 because I'm celebrating this year, y'all. I wanted to get back to community development. So I started in community development, went into it at a state level, went into infrastructure, went into real estate investment because I wanted to understand what the economics of that Mandela campaign really taught me how we are being bamboozled around the issue of economics. And I wanted to get back into culture. And so one of the young men that I mentored, I was mentored by people when I got out of school. Mel King was one of those people. And he taught me the importance of always mentoring, because you're going to be surprised what you get back from the person that you're mentoring. And I found out about the Smithsonian job from a young man whose uncle happened to work at the Smithsonian. He said, they're looking for a project executive for this museum. You should check it out. I said, oh man, I haven't done anything recently in history. I don't do museums, blah, blah, blah. He said, apply anyway. And I did. And I got the gig. And that process reminded me very much of the fact that the potential that we have as individuals is immense, and you don't know where your blessing's going to come from. And you have to be open to all people. The Mandela campaign was birthed in Andrew's heart, not in his head. He came to me with that passion for it. He had been talking to a bunch of people. And basically he asked if I wanted to throw down. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, throw down, when I was a kid, one of my partners came up and said, hey man, we're going to go over to this party, we're going to throw down. And that basically meant something was going to happen. And you needed to be ready and psychologically ready and be willing to put everything to task. So this effort was a throwdown. There were a lot of people that we talked to. We talked about how to build this process. And you're sorry for the typo in here, but the computers, when you're on a plane and you're typing, and it changed secession to succession. But that's a good change. But the issue of incorporation versus secession, you heard us speak about quite a bit. The power of language and branding and media and propaganda is immense. And I think the most profound application of it in modern history was in Nazi Germany. And Goebbels' brilliance was put to a task to perpetrate evil through the notion of telling a lie and telling lies over and over again. And that's the foundation of wickedness. And we currently have some people doing that in our country, so we need to recognize. Andrew and I both were students of history who had a real passion for it. He was a phenomenal musician, phenomenal. If you heard that boy play the violin, it was amazing. But also he was a phenomenal journalist, and he understood in a deep way propaganda. We both had many nights of doing a colonialist analysis of what was going on in Roxbury. We saw no difference between Ghana, Nigeria, parts of China, parts of the Caribbean, and this country in terms of politics that were going on. No difference. When Lonnie Bunch put together the programming for the National Museum of African American History and Culture, it was a big issue about how much of the diaspora should we focus on, and we focused on that at the very beginning. Not me personally, I wasn't a curator, but I was part of the conversation because I had to manage the process of getting us there. And that conversation of understanding how colonialism and exploitation works is really important. And when someone says, "Make America Great Again," my initial reaction is stolen land, stolen labor. And so, I mean, are you talking about stealing land again and stealing labor again to make America great again? So those questions and that understanding at a very kind of visceral, root, simple level is really important for us to remind each other, because every generation is going to experience it on their own terms. This question of communication is really important. Mandela, Massachusetts is the place to be. That was a tagline in the rap song that Andrew wrote. And if we can get the full lyrics of that, you will see that is not just a light ditty. The music was a light ditty. It was consciously made as a light ditty to connect your ear. If you heard that whole record, that whole piece, it was an art piece. And part of the theme that we wanted to talk about tonight, because this is such an expansive topic, it comes back to art. And that's kind of where I am right now. I'm working with Project Row Houses, for those of you who are familiar with the organization. And I am thoroughly committed to the fact that art in our lives and an appreciation for how it functions in our lives is crucial to the survival of mankind on this planet. And we're at the current nexus. I think each generation has this nexus of, are we going to survive or not? And so we're going through our current cycle. So I don't get too agitated about the crazy. I just know there's always going to be some crazy. And the question is, am I doing my job to help put my wheel to the task, or my shoulder to the wheel to that task of bringing some light into the darkness? So part of the work was focused on that. In terms of work, and I'll speak to that, there's no substitute for it. Just there's no substitute. I don't care what you're doing. If it matters, if it's worthy of your efforts, it will be hard. And that means you're going to have to do things when you really don't feel like doing it. And the last thing you want to do is to do it. And if I have to say anything to anybody about any endeavor, you've got to learn how to work hard. And again, one of the things that I appreciated about working with Andrew is that it was all about hard work. Going into this slide, the work around reflections of messaging, I wanted to focus on this notion of reflecting. And the process of the work that we followed was conceptualization, researching, reflection, planning, action, reaction, reflection, and then reaction. That process is pretty much what it's all about in change agency. There are lots of different terms, lots of different more complex ways, but that's pretty much the essence of it. We dealt with the citizens petition process. That was our focus for this action. There's a lot of debate around community organizing versus activism and what is community organizing, and Saul Alinsky's work around labor organizing and whatnot. And a lot of people confuse labor organizing with community organizing, and the two are different.
Thank you.
The two are different.
Very different.
So I think it's really, really important for us to study what that's all about and have more of these conversations so that we can share with each other the distinctions, so that for those of you who don't necessarily know it and somebody tells you we're going to do some organizing, you can be critical about what you're talking about and what are you trying to do. You first have to understand and define the task, because you cannot do everything. What happens is we want to change the world. We want to get rid of Donald Trump. We want to, not have any more Steve Bannons on the world. Well, that ain't going to happen tomorrow. It's going to happen because you deliberately focus on a task that moves you in that direction. You want to commit to the task. Folks get committed all the time. We like ideas, but everybody ain't committed. And a good bit of our process that we worked on, we spent a year in a process of building kind of a sense of who's committed. Chuck Walker and a few others who, and I was an alum from Harvard, we were going to have breakfast meetings and invite important people out of the community every Friday morning, and we'd pay for breakfast. And I don't remember whose idea it was. Chuck seems to think it was his idea. but the idea was, let's have our breakfast meetings at the Harvard Faculty Club. So folks would show up. You invite them at 8 o'clock, they show, and they showed up on time. And we had breakfast, and we got served, and it was a real nice thing, and tablecloth, the whole nine. But we had very intense conversations with a variety of people, one-on-one, from Gloria Fox to Bruce Boeing to Mel King, and we did this for a year, just talking with people one-on-one, while we also did legal research. Came to find out that no one had formed a city in this Commonwealth of Massachusetts since 1870 some odd. So we knew that there was no one in the legislature who understood the process. Leg up. And so we decided to dive in on that basis. We knew that we wanted to see change. We knew we wanted to be agents of change. We knew we were willing to be committed. We knew we were armed and organized. We were single black educated men who were politically aware, who were talented, and who had a support system. If all else failed, I'd go home. And so I wasn't scared. I didn't mind the fact that I was under certain pressure. Andrew was a producer for ABC News guys at the time when we started this. He got fired like that. Okay? I happened to have a brother who was one of my mentors, who was my boss, and he ran interference for me working for the state. But I was under a lot of pressure. And we won't talk about the ballots and all that kind of stuff, and the threats and all those things. But believe you me, if you know you've touched the nerve, when you start talking about going for the land, and when you make a serious move for it, stuff will happen. So this question of committed, we knew that we needed to begin to feel out who was going to be committed. And I'm not going to relitigate the process. I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to criticize people because it doesn't do us well. Just understand that personalities will flip when the pressure gets high. And you will see, it's kind of like a jack in the box. You start cranking that box and then boop! And whatever pops out the box is who you got.
Yeah.
And you know who you got. And that way you can then say, okay, this is who I got, now we can work. So we went through that process. And the second campaign, a lot of jacks in the box had popped. And so we had a good idea of who was and who wasn't. We made a conscious choice not to accept resources from anybody outside of the city. We did this with our own money. A lot of people said, we didn't know how to organize. That was not true. We chose not to do certain things that one might thought you should do if you are a good community organizer, because we only had limited resources, so we chose to apply our resources. After the first campaign, we felt a great deal of success. Why? Because we both, and the people who worked with us, got to go to just about every door in Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan. That was a foot campaign. We knocked on doors, sat in people's homes, talked about it, get them to sign a petition. We didn't just stand out at the Dudley station or a downtown crossing or anything like that. We went around door to door. I wore out a couple pairs of shoes. And that effort of direct engagement with people was crucial for our own deeper understanding. The financial numbers, I won't go there. Suffice it to say, it would have worked. Economically, it would have worked. And so I think at the time, financially, Boston was a hot mess. If you think about the fact that any city has debt, and that debt is on certain obligations, it wasn't just the annual cash flow. Come on now. Econ 101 will tell you that. So if you looked at a full understanding of the financial model of the city, you could understand quite well what was going on, and that there was value to be had, and that in the separation agreement between Roxbury, Mandela, Massachusetts, and Boston, that separation agreement would have some financial obligations that need to be dealt with. So this question of debt, fire station got built in a certain area. Who has the debt? Office buildings and institutions with 121A agreements, those financial instruments. Who has that? All of my friends from the Kennedy School and from the business school were saying to us, this is serious, because it raises a lot of questions. We didn't have an answer. We really didn't know. But we knew well enough that the question of going straight for the value and saying we're going to capture the value and then we'll deal with the backside. Because it's a lot better arguing when you got something when you ain't got nothing. I'd rather go down fighting with something than to go down with nothing. So that was our attitude. In terms of the petition process, again, I tried to lay out some simple principles. Understand and define the task, commit to the task, plan the work of the task, recruit others to the task, get them to commit to the task, execute the task, aka just do it. One of the things about discipline and working is that it is about craft, and that's another aspect that relates to art. I'm sorry, I just don't believe that Jackson Pollock got to where he was without having done his work of craft. If I just went up and picked up a paintbrush, did that splatter, I don't think so. There's a craft built in that. When I look at that painting on the wall, when I see how kids really get into stuff and work things out in their way, there's a craft related to that. And that ties to planning. I was always told about the 7 P's. Proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance. And we were able to get meet our primary goal of the thing that we could control. Because what we said, we can't control what people do on the vote, because we're not going to lie, we're not going to manipulate. We're not going to get money from people who don't have a direct interest. What we're going to do is use our own resources and put our own stuff out there, and then make the case with as stronger effort as we can do. And the one thing we said that we definitely control is that we're going to get them signatures. We can get those signatures, and we did that. I can't tell you how many times I was tired. Hey, call me up 5 o'clock in the morning. Hey, man, we got the plan. If somebody's missing, then I don't be out there. You got to pick up some slack there. I said, man, what is nothing more important? Totally sold out. Totally sold out. So if we want to have change agency in the community, in our community that's been colonized the way it has been, our stolen land, our stolen labor, you're going to have to be sold out. Nobody's going to give it up. Forget it. DSNI, Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative. You think that happened without this effort? Okay. Bruce Bowen becoming president of City Council. You think that happened without this effort? So we didn't do this as a wedge issue, but we knew that there would be repercussions, because the minute you go after the real deal, they're going to start trying to give out other stuff. Because if they figure, oh man, we had a legit posture. That is, we positioned ourselves legitimately. We were up in their face, and they knew if it got to a legal question, everything had to get opened up. And it was going to be a mess for a lot of folks. So that's why, that's the politics of it. And that has not changed for any significant community development effort that I have ever seen in this country. Not changed. So don't get the illusion that because certain things are happening that everything is hunky-dory. Don't get the illusion that because Dudley looks like it does right now that everything is going better. I worked on Dudley. I worked on the Ferdinand building for the VRA. Mayor Menino, bless his heart, supported the idea of moving the school committee to Dudley. Why? Because commercial businesses weren't going to go there without shoppers. The school committee building has lots of shoppers. That's basically what it's about. And on top of that, the city was able to get money off a property that was very valuable, again, the land, that was downtown. So it wasn't no gift to the community. So, again, thinking about these issues is really, really important. The National Museum of African American History and Culture is on a site that's at the hinge of that forced march from the Capitol to the Lincoln Memorial. Everybody who walks up and down there stopped there, and they had tents and would sell drinks and whatnot, and you had a line of sight to the White House. We had about 6 alternative sites that they were trying to push us on. Ani said, don't do anything but have that site. And so it was a fight. It was a fight to get that site. And at the brilliance of David Ajayi's design sensibility, let's make it dark. Right? But textured, rich, not just dark. It could have been dark anodized metal. But the fact that it's a filigree, the fact that it's an African handiwork of texture and scale with a form that is as significant as the Washington Monument, inverted. The angles of the walls of that building are matched to the top of the Washington Monument, the angles of the Washington Monument. So when you go to D.C. and you take a look at that building, walk around it, it works. There's a lot of work with light and dark. The building does just the opposite of every other building down in D.C. for a particular purpose. It was purposely built that way. But it also works like all of those buildings. It's monumental. It has a grand entry, which is on the notion of a front porch. And when we begin to think about how to design and build our communities with references to cultural images and things that matter to us, you get different architecture. Those kinds of questions about community building and how we make things happen are really important. Conceptualization before research, research before reflection, reflection before planning, planning before action, and action before organizing. That's why I think there's a difference between community action versus community organizing. You have to show competence. You have to show action. One of the reasons we always wore suits, if you knew Andrew, that brother ain't never wear no suit, right? But he said, whenever we get out here, we're gonna suit up because we want to present a posture that's the same. To have the Donahue show, the Today show, and all of those programs on the same day was engineered. Didn't just happen. To get the media coverage that we had was engineered. It did not just happen. We went to the editorial boards. We cultivated relationships with media people. We got them to write stories. We wrote material for them. We pushed themes because we knew that there would be counter themes that would come out against us. So what I'm saying is that you have to be intentional. You have to recognize that there will be forces against you. Why is art so important to all of this? The art of it all and the art in it all. The art of it all and the art in it all. I'm putting that out there as a reflection for each of you. We all have our own relationship to artistic endeavors. Art as a cultural product. Art as a cultural product. Art as a cultural tool. Art as a medium for personal expression, livelihood, protest, celebration, motivation, entertainment, inspiration, group identity, memorial. A lot of other things fall into those categories, but that's what art can do. So let's reflect on that for a minute. I'd like us to have a moment of silence in memory of Andrew and his commitment. He's a brother that I love. And he died in pain. And it can happen when you throw it out. And you have to be ready for that pain. And if you're not, then don't worry about it. Don't do it. Watch The Simpsons. Any questions?
There are people you meet for the first time whom you recognize as being authentic and unlike anyone you've met before, even in a long lifetime of introductions and chance encounters. That's the way I felt about Andrew P. Jones. Somehow he found me, having heard that as a public television programming executive in the neighboring state of Connecticut, only a few years into my duties, that I had, quote, an open shop, looking for new voices and untried ideas. You might even say a risk taker. Little did I realize at the time that whatever daring I had in pursuit of unconventional ways of making television, his courage and willingness to risk literally his own life to find a story that interested him surpassed anything I could ever imagine in terms of commitment and adventurism. So for years, I would be on the receiving end of the line as Andrew traveled to Iraq and Panama in war times and ventured all over the world in search of stories about Amerasian children left behind and often unwanted in Vietnam, or to South Africa to get the true story about reconciliation. He had no resources to speak of, no crew or major network behind him. Yet in many ways, those elements would have slowed him down. In search of his story, Andrew alone had those folks outnumbered with his bravura and his creativity. Leaving the projects of Richmond, Virginia, he was never afraid to be in a place others might have thought he didn't belong. Places like the prestigious Exeter Academy in New Hampshire, attending high school, the New England Conservatory of Music for his bachelor's degree, and to hone his skills as a violin virtuoso, and Boston University to obtain his master's degree in journalism. And it led him to the remarkable collaboration with Curtis Davis to attempt something so bold and daring that it shook the power structure in Boston to its core. He needed to be heard, and the unflinching manner in which he conveyed his thoughts left no one to doubt what he thought of you and how he imagined you perceived him. I met Andrew after the Mandela, Massachusetts movement, and whereas most of us would have been drained, exhausted, and spent by that experience, Andrew's wanderlust and spirit undaunted called him to return to his storytelling by hitchhiking across America to find new hope for this country, just as his dream had been dashed in the original cauldron of our democracy. Thus was born the groundbreaking and Emmy award-winning documentary Thumbs Across America in 1989. What an incredible thing he did as an African-American trying to hitchhike across country to see what America was really made of. It's with some pathos that I present the last segment of the documentary at the event that we held in Boston, because in it was a Native American who brought Andrew to the Golden Gate Bridge as he had hoped when he started out the journey. But the man had all these words of encouragement to him, saying, you never give up. You never know what tomorrow is going to bring, because there's always a possibility of something better on the other side. If only Andrew had returned to the gentle wisdom of that last driver on Thumbs Across America in the difficult moments before Andrew's tragic end in South Africa in 2010. He took his own life. Fortunately for me, I had the privilege to work with Andrew one final time when I went to South Africa to work on Ipi and Tombi, an African dance special for PBS in 1996. And it seemed that Andrew had found a new path with his family and the production company Black Earth, which he founded with his wife Kabeshni. In the end, Andrew was a volatile mix of emotions, never settled in the moment, never content to be content. This explains his soaring accomplishments and why he was done too soon. In my career, I've had many titles. Never prouder, though, of the one Andrew gave me, because I knew how hard-earned it was. He said, you're the only white programming boss I ever trusted. I admired many of the producers I worked with over the years, but never respected or loved any of them more than Andrew P. Jones. Finally, at peace.